Hi, I'm Michael Johnson. I'm a HiLite photographer. I've been on the staff for 1 year, and I'd like to share with you some of the things I've learned shooting sports. This video is for new photographers of the HiLite, and especially on how to work with the sports section. Let's begin. To take photos for the sports section, you're first going to need to attend a sports maestro. Maestros are usually announced via email, and they'll tell you when and where they're happening. Usually they're around the time of distribution, either that SRT or the following or previous SRT to distribution. They're usually in the HiLite room or one of the rooms near it, and it'll say in the email where it is. As a photographer, you really don't have to bring much. Reporters are required to bring story ideas and sources for the story ideas. As a photographer, your job isn't necessarily to find sources or stories. What you're going to need to do is show up and be assigned to a reporter. That's not to say that you aren't allowed to bring stories. In fact, you're somewhat encouraged to bring your own stories, and be sure that if you have a story, to sort of have a thought of who you're going to include in it and what sources. At the Maestro, you're going to be assigned to a reporter and their story. A good thing to do after you've been assigned to them is to talk to your reporter and see what their angle is on the story. A lot of times the reporter won't have every single detail of the story yet, and it's good to get their phone or email so you can talk to them and see what kind of photos they'd like for it. After the Maestro, an assignment sheet will probably be given to you by an editor. If they're not in your period, they can usually be found in the basket for your period. On the assignment sheet, it'll say the reporter, the angle of the story, sources, and what kind of photos the editor would like. It's always a good idea to either find the editor if they're in your period or send them an email and talk about what kind of ideas they have for the spread. You should talk to your editor to see what kind of photos they want, and you should also talk to your reporter to see what photos that they want for their angle. After you and your editor have cleared out what sources you're going to be using, either you or your reporter will be contacting those sources. Sometimes you'll go along with your reporter to take photos, but more often than not, you're going to be going on your own. So it's important to get the sources' contact information, whether it be an email or a phone yourself, so you can talk to them and set up a time to take photos. Especially for sports, a lot of times you're going to be taking photos out on the field with them or in the court, or you're going to be taking an environmental shot with them. So it's important to, if you're not just going to take a portrait of them, to have them be prepared for their photo. When you're setting up a time with a reporter, it's preferred that you call them. Texting and email are alright, but calling is always preferred. Don't be afraid to call, no one's going to bite you. Introduce yourself as a photographer from the staff, and if they don't already know about the reporter's stories, it's good to tell them that they're being used for a story, and if that's alright. Next, you'll want to ask if it's alright to take photos of them, and if so, where and when would be the best time for them. If they agree, try to explain to them what kind of things that you need from them, whether it be for them to bring their jersey or another item for your photo. And it's also good to ask them if, for instance, you're going to go to their practice, for them to ask their coach if it's alright to go. Once you have confirmation that everything's alright and in order to go, you're going to want to get some equipment to actually take photos on. If you don't already have a camera, the HiLite staff currently has Canon 70Ds as of 2015. The 70D has an 18 to 135mm lens, which is very good for sports because you can have that zoom to reach in. Additionally, the staff also has the 70 to 200mm lens that you can check out. It's especially good for sports like football, where you need to zoom in and you're on a sideline. This isn't to say that you should rely on these lenses. In fact, it's better to get closer to your subject. Additionally, the staff has tripods if you'd like to take one along with a shoot. When taking photos of sports, you should probably be on aperture priority if you don't already know how to shoot on manual. If you don't know how to shoot on aperture priority, a photographer or the internet should be able to help you with that. Now, if you're going to be doing a very large photo, like one that covers an entire spread, you're going to want to shoot in RAW. On the Canon series of cameras, you're going to want to go to Menu, and on the very first page, there is Image Quality. If you set it to RAW, you will get higher quality photos because your camera will record every single bit of data that touches the sensor. RAWs do take up a lot of memory. JPEGs are smaller, but generally have lesser quality. As a photojournalist, you're not always going to have control of what's going on in the field. So it's nice to be able to shoot in RAW because you can edit your photos more later to fix whatever's happening that you weren't able to control. So if you've talked to your source, and you've talked to a reporter and your editor, and it's okay to take photos during SRT or in school, before or after, these are some tips you should follow. Of course, if you're going to be shooting an SRT, you should ask the HiLite teacher for an SRT pass to go take photos. Remember, with SRT passes, you first have to report to the HiLite room and then to your destination after having checked out. What you shouldn't do with portraits is put them up against a locker or a brick wall. If you're not going to be taking photos in school, and you're going to show up to a practice or a game, transportation will be an issue. Newcomers to the staff probably won't be able to drive yet, so be sure to coordinate with a parent or someone else to take you there. If you do drive, plan to be there a little bit early so you don't show up late. If you're showing up to a game or a practice, go up to an official or a coach and ask them if it's alright to take photos, because you don't want to be there without the official's consent. And of course, it's important to find your source. You won't always know what they look like, so if you do find a coach, ask for your source, and if you can't find your source at all, go to someone on the team and ask them. Make sure you're taking photos of the right person. I myself have taken photos of the wrong person before and had to reshoot, so don't make that mistake. When you're out in the field, there's a few things that you should look out for. There's a few rules of etiquette when out in the field shooting. First off, don't be shy. A lot of bad photos come from photographers that are just too far away and aren't able to capture any sort of valuable moment from that distance. So get close to your subject so you can be able to take a better photo. But that's not to say that you'd be in the way. You wouldn't want to get hit by a ball or run over by someone running. So be close by, but try not to be a nuisance to what's going on. When out in the field, it's always good to check that you're actually getting the photos you think you are and your camera is getting everything you need. And if not, adjusting. But that's not to say that you should keep on checking your camera continuously. Stop every once in a while to make sure that your settings are correct and your photos are coming out well. If photos are posed, be sure to tell your subject what items they need to bring for their photo. If they need to bring their jersey or the ball of their sport, be sure to tell them that so that they can bring it for the photo. If you're having them do an activity and post their shots, be sure to talk to them and tell them what to do. If they don't know what to do, they're probably going to act awkwardly and that'll reflect in your photos. So make sure they're comfortable and okay with what they're doing and know what you want from them. And then also, there's an ethical side to posing photos. As a photojournalist, you should always shy away from posing photos unless asked for by your editor or a reporter. It's alright to take them, and you shouldn't be scared of them, and you should definitely know how to do them. But never try to pass off a photo that is posed as a candid. But I'm sure they've talked to you about journalistic ethics before getting here. So after you're done with a shoot, there's some things you should do. Once the photos are done, you should take everyone's information, look through your photos, and if there's any ones that you think you're going to submit that have someone that isn't your subject in them, it's good to take their name as well, in case it's needed for a caption. So after you're done taking your photos and collecting your information, it's always good to maybe shake their hand and say goodbye, and then get your ride to get out of there, or if you can drive, get out of there yourself. It's also preferred that you write your own captions when submitting your photos, and if you need help writing captions, you can ask a photo editor. On the subject of editing, it's also suggested, since you're a photographer, that you learn a little bit on how to correct things in your photo. So although Photoshop is frowned upon generally if you're using it to distort an image, if you're fixing maybe the color balance in an image, it's good to do that before you send it to your editor. A good way to send your editor your photos is to attach them in an email in Google Drive, or to set up a folder in Google Drive and share it with them and give them the right to edit the photos as well. Now your job isn't necessarily done once you've taken the photos. A good thing to do is to go back and before PDF happens, check with the editor and see that the photos you've taken and the captions are alright with you. Your job's not quite done there either, because you're also proofreading after PDF. On top of that, you also have to distribute. So it's a constant job, but it's a rewarding and a fun job to be a photographer on HiLite. So with that, get out there and take some photos, tell some stories, because HiLite is the news source of Carmel High School.